Hey everyone, welcome to the Camino Cafe. I am so happy that you're here with us today, whether you are watching us on our YouTube channel or you are listening to us on our podcast. And, for me, this is all about providing a platform for pilgrims to be able to share their stories, to help all the pilgrims that have walked before to relive what it's like to be walking a Camino. And this is especially for the people out there who are considering walking. I hope that when you hear the stories of the pilgrims that I'm interviewing, that you will be inspired to make the reservations for that walk as soon as it's safe and the world is ready for us to do so. So thank you for watching or listening. And I hope that if you like what I'm doing here, that you would give us a rating on our podcast or, give a little thumbs up on the YouTube video, because that just inspires the pilgrims that I interview and inspires me. And you know what, if you make a comment or you send me an email, I do respond. I love hearing from pilgrims, and who knows, maybe you'll come on and be interviewed and share your story if you've already walked. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of the Camino Cafe. I hope you feel like you have just sat down for that second pilgrim breakfast, or that you've just met us after our walk and you're just sitting down to hear about our Caminos. So today, our guest is Steve Walther, and Steve and I got connected through one of our mutual friends, Guilherme, and then Steve reached out to me and sent a really sweet message, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But first, Steve, I just wanted to say welcome and thank you for being so willing to come to the Camino Cafe and talk today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be part of the Camino Cafe. Both of us are Dan Mullins disciples, I think. And we're both kind of Camino dorks when it comes to everything Camino and thinking about it and talking about it. So to be part of the royalty of the folks that you've interviewed so far, I'm honored.
Oh, well, that's how I feel every time I do an interview, right? I feel like I'm not worthy to be doing this. Like, there's some amazing pilgrims out in the world, and I just love learning everyone's stories. So you and I have had a little bit of an advantage because we've talked a little bit over Facebook and we've talked a little bit before this interview started. But I just wonder if you could let viewers and listeners know, where you are in the world right now.
I'm here at the world headquarters in Eagle, Idaho.
Eagle, Idaho. I've never been to Eagle, Idaho. How far is it from Boise?
10 miles. We're just,
10 miles.
Just west of Boise.
Oh, okay. All right. Beautiful area. Beautiful area.
It is nice here. It's funny. I get asked all the time, why in the heck do you have to go all the way across the world to go for a walk? And it's, there's a little more to it than that. But no, I like it where I am, as where you are. It's very beautiful, and blessed to be here.
Yeah. I did think that when I was living in Salt Lake City at the time that I walked my Camino, and, there's some beautiful hiking there.
Yeah.
A lot of people are like, why are you going all the way to Spain to walk?
Oh, right.
Right. But what was missing? The cafes, the people, all the stuff, the magic of the Camino. As great as those trails are out in nature, which you and I have talked about, we share a great love for nature. But there's something very special about the Camino, which I'm sure will come up many times during our interview. But let's back up and talk about, you've been on a couple of Caminos, right? So let's start with your first one, and let's let everybody hear a little bit about that seed that was planted that eventually got you to go on that first Camino.
Well, without going too far back, is I lived in Spain in 92, 93, 94, 95, that period in there. And before that, I shared with Lee before, I'd actually read Paulo Coelho's book when I was in college, but I didn't really realize that it was a real place and a real thing. And it was more of a book you read and kind of for the adventure, as opposed to knowing the particulars of the reality of it. And I had a roommate in Granada whose family was Galician. They were Gallegos. He was from Canada, but his family was out there. And he took me up there to visit his family at one point, and we were hanging around the plaza in front of the cathedral, and all of these people were mulling around with backpacks and being like, they do when they come into the plaza there. And I said, what the heck is going on here? And he said, they're pilgrims. And I said, pilgrims? What the heck are these? What are pilgrims? And he told me, oh, it's the Camino de Santiago. And it just intrigued me from that point on. And over the course of the next 10, 15 years or so, I had the good luck of visiting Santiago several times. And every time I was, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And then I kind of told myself a line in the sand that I have to do this by the time I'm 50 or I'm never going to do it.
Mm.
And so June, I think of June of 2018. My wife is from Spain, and we didn't mention that. I ended up, when I lived there, I married Maria Eugenia, and she's from Jerez in the south, and we met in Granada, got married in Spain, and moved back. And she was visiting her family, so I had a little bit of leverage. I said, "Hey, when you get back, can I go on a Camino? You're doing it now. I want to go back and do it." So she went and visited her family, and then I got permission to go from La Jefa, the boss lady at my house, and she kindly let me out on the adventure, and the rest is history. Completely different than what I thought. As those of you who have done it or thinking about doing it, I'll tell you this: it changes you forever. And I think Lee can attest to this, that we think about very little else other than going back, because I think there's a feeling that you get, that you come away with, that you want to replicate over and over again.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. So what do you think that is? Because when I speak to pilgrims, they've either gone multiple times or they've got the next one planned,
Mm-hmm.
So what is it about the Camino, in your opinion, that pulls us back?
Well, I think when you're there, you are probably the best version of yourself, I think. And I've never really thought about it that way, but everybody goes out of their way to connect, to help, to be in a Camino community of all moving in the same direction, all having the same sentiment. It doesn't matter your background. It doesn't matter where you are social, economically, all of that kind of stuff. We're all pilgrims, and we're all going. Now obviously you're going to meet some people on the way that maybe you don't jive with exactly, but overall it's just good. And that sense of detachment from the day-to-day crazy busyness that we all have every day. And it's a chance. One of Dan's, I don't remember who it was, but one of Dan's, Dan Mullins interviews once said, it's a 500-mile confession box.
Yes.
And it really is a 500-mile confessional, from the standpoint as you're there letting it all out. You're listening to everybody else let it all out. You have the freedom to do so without recourse of your neighbor knowing about your concerns and problems and whatnot. But more importantly is you have time to really focus on what you have rather than what you don't have, like we were talking about before the call. And I think it's being taken out of the day-to-day and put into a situation where you're forced to focus on yourself, on your family, on everything, is magical. And we want to get back to that. And I know, I hear a lot of people say when they get back, the first thing they do is empty their closets and declutter and get rid of the stuff that's not important and focus more on the stuff that is important. And I know I've made it a purpose in my life now with that to walk every day, just to be able to get, everything in order. How did the day go? What could I have done better? What do I need to do tomorrow? Maybe I need to say, I love you to my wife and to my kids one more time. Those kind of things that we get so busy we don't do.
Yes.
And to be grateful and to put it into perspective, the gift that we have. And the walking there is magical, but walking here, wherever here is for everybody, you can continue that, but it sure is nice to do it there with second breakfast and good coffee and wine.
Absolutely. And I think that opportunity to be able to do that on back-to-back days for that duration of time each day, right? And in our lives back home, we don't necessarily have the time to be out walking 5 or 6 hours every single day back to back, right? But if we can create those opportunities, like you're saying, even if it's a mini 1-hour Camino every single day, it still has many of the elements that we can use to re-examine how we're living our lives.
Sometimes it's perspective, and sometimes it's reflection, But other times it's just getting out and seeing something really cool, like an owl or a baby deer or whatever it is. That that all of that excitement and all of that interpersonal reflection, I think, is invaluable. And then today, we go, and this is, again, I hadn't really thought about it this way till just a second, but even though we live in a world where you and I are talking right now and looking at each other, and your listeners, when you broadcast this, are going to be able to listen to this from all over the place. Even though we have the capability of communicating easier than we ever have in the history of the world, we don't communicate anymore. We don't have meaningful conversations. We don't, I just remember like my parents and grandparents, that people would come over and visit, and you would sit down and they would maybe play cards, or they would sit on the patio and they would visit. And we don't do that anymore. We text and we talk to more people, but we don't have this connection. And I think as human beings, we all want it. And sometimes we think, I'd rather just text the person and not have it, not waste an hour talking to them. But we all kind of, I think, deep down want it. Mm-hmm. And all of the technology that we have, that part of life is a thing of the past, and the Camino gets us back to it, because you really have meaningful conversations every day.
Oh, you're absolutely right. You really have brought thank you for bringing some memories to my mind of being at my grandparents, right? And remembering their friends coming over. Some of my best times was, being that little grandchild sitting at my little chair while they played dominoes, but their friends would stay for hours, and it was really cool. And I think during my Camino, I see the same thing. I would run into people and we have these very deep and meaningful conversations. And even now, I remarked to one of them that I wished that I got to have that. I would see somebody at a Starbucks, but I would know here in the States, if I started having a conversation like that with somebody at Starbucks, they'd be like, "What's wrong with this girl? Why is she talking to me?" But on the Camino, it felt like the most natural thing in the world.
Mm-hmm. And you know what? It didn't feel, well, first off, it was okay to come out of your shell to talk to people, because sometimes here we're like, well, I don't want them to think I'm a weirdo or something. And with me, that obviously is a risk I take every time I talk. but also I think the format, the platform from which to do it, because everybody's walking around wanting to talk to somebody, whether it be, hey, you never believe what just happened, or once you get to know them a little bit better. And when I say get to know them a little bit better, sometimes that's 20 minutes on the walk, that you're okay to unload, something that's going on. The first time I walked, I was having kind of a transition at work kind of thing. And I really wanted to outline what I needed to do. Mm-hmm. And I ran the predicament I was in, I ran by 20 different people when I was there. They didn't know anything about what I do, didn't know anything about the details, but hey, with this situation, what do you think? And I got real frank answers that weren't filled with platitudes and me hearing what they think I wanted to hear. And but also, you meet and talk to people that you would never meet in ordinary work in your daily life. Mm-hmm. I met a guy from I'm talking without answering your question that you had, so bear with me if we get off the rails here a little bit.
I love what you're talking about. And that's the thing about Camino conversations, right? Is we go exactly where we need to go.
The first Camino I did, I met this guy. He was probably in his late 50s, from Brazil, spoke Portuguese, Spanish, and English. And he was the most interesting man. His family owned movie theaters in Brazil. And he was very into, he's very religious, and he was very into your signs and all that kind of stuff too, and the saints and all of these different kind of and so where we go, we'd see something, go, oh, that's Saint so and so, it's Saint so and so with this and this, and I learned so much about stuff that I wouldn't have even thought of before. And why is that saint important? And he'd tell you, this saint did this and this, and we pray this way because of this, and so he was kind of like the spiritual guide for a while when we were walking. but he was just a happy-go-lucky Brazilian guy that we met along the way. And one of the neatest things happened on that first Camino. We go into the cathedral, and then we go to the mass, and we went to the later one, the Camino Mass. And first off, the funny thing, when for whatever reason, when you sign the book, and then they say we have this many pilgrims come from Canada, and this many come from America, and this many come, and they went through all the countries, and then they got to one, and they said, and we had one Camino from Idaho. And I don't know how they confuse Idaho with America, but it was like all these countries, and they said, and one came in from Idaho. And so everybody, my group, we all laughed, but we were with the two Canadian women and this Brazilian guy, and it was a special mass that the bishop was doing the mass, and the bishop said afterwards, he said, and he said this in Spanish. He said, if anybody would like to join me on a tour of the cathedral after the mass, please meet here next to the altar afterwards. And of course, a small percentage of the people spoke Spanish, and everybody just started leaving. And the Portuguese guy said, hey, did you hear that? I said, I think so. I'm not sure if I totally understood what he said, but he said, stay here. And he said, yeah, he's going to give us a tour. So everybody rushed, and then there was like 30 of us left that stayed. And he took us behind everywhere. We walked, the whole cathedral's closed, doors locked, lights out, except for just a few walking around lights and us.
Oh,
and
wow.
And the Brazilian guy was just like, he was in nirvana. And the bishop took us in the back, and there was like this big opening area in the back that you don't see from the outside. And he gave us all a piece of paper, and we gathered around this big cauldron, and he was speaking in Spanish, and then he had a lady with him that translated into English everything he said. And so everybody there understood what was going on. And he gave all of us a piece of paper, and he said, in the old days, pilgrims would come in, and they came all of this way, and their clothes were then all tattered and rotten and smelly and yucky, and they would get new clothes for the walk back. And their old clothes they would burn as a symbol of burning their sins. And he said, I'm not going to ask you guys to burn your clothes right now, but here's a piece of paper. And we lit the paper, and then he said a prayer, and then we put the paper in the big cauldron, and it was just like magical. And then we walked back up to the main altar. And the main altar were up in front of the cathedral. And he said, everybody come up onto the altar, up to the front there. And he said, sit down. We all sat down around the altar, up on the main thing. And he sat in this big chair up there. And he said, does anyone want to tell their story? And these people got up and told the one that I really remember was this young teenage boy from Mexico. And he said, my village raised money for me to go to this. And it's meant so much to me, and I've learned so much about myself. He said, I'm going to go back and do everything I can to help raise money for other people to come and do this. And he said, I'm the first person in my family that's ever left Mexico, and I was able to do this. And we were like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And the Brazilian guy talked about his family and everything that how this was important to him, but it was just with the bishop and on the main altar of the cathedral. And it was like one of those things that had I been not with him and caught that little thing that he said, we would have been in the pub drinking beer, and not have experienced that real magical thing. And those are the little things happen like that like I don't know how many years later, 4 or 5 years later now, I still get goosebumps thinking about how that all panned out.
Seriously, wow, thank you for sharing that story. I think that is so full of Camino magic, and I'm so happy for you to have that experience. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, and it was really, really, really good. But the Camino magic and the stories that happen.
Yeah.
And there's so many things that happen. My second Camino I did with my daughter, and she graduated from high school on June 1st or June 2nd, and on June 3rd we were in Oviedo starting our Camino. We did the Primitivo.
And what year was this?
What was that?
What year was this?
That was in 2019.
2019. Oh, yeah. Wow. Okay.
June of 2019. So my daughter and I set off to do the Primitivo, and I was so, she just graduated from high school, and I was so excited for her to experience this magic.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first day we walked, and it was a wonderful, beautiful day, and we walked, and nothing really happened. I mean, other than us spending a day together in the beauty of this, and took some great pictures and had some good meals. And I kept saying, her name was Daniela. I said, Danny, something's going to happen. Trust me, there's this magic that's going to happen. And then when something did finally happen, I was like, that's it. You got it. Now you saw it. You've experienced it. Now you know what I'm talking about, right? She goes, yeah, I get it, Dad. But it was, this things happen, and if you go there like looking for it, it's a little harder than just things happening,
Yeah.
right?
Did you have to talk Danny into doing this? Like because she was 18 when she did this, so just graduated high school.
She was actually 17, and she turned 18 the day we got back.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. But she'd been to Spain many times. Like I said, my wife's from Spain. It wasn't her first time in Spain. She'd probably been in Spain probably 6, 7, 8 times before that. But she's very much in shape. In fact, she's in school right now studying sports training.
Oh, okay.
Sports med. She's doing sports med. And so she, like in high school, she played rugby, and so she's real fit and able. But yeah, she didn't have the, she at that age, she went because I wanted to go with her, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And when she came back, she kind of played it cool. But I heard one of my wife's friends talk to her about it, and she told her how awesome and important it was and amazing to her. She wouldn't tell me that, but she told other people that. But that's how that goes. But and then I have one more son in high school that we'll see if he wants to do. I'm not going to force him to do it, but yeah. So hopefully.
I was just going to ask you, so you did have a moment of magic. Is that something you'd want to share, or is that just too personal?
Yeah. No. So on the Camino Primitivo, in the Camino Primitivo, it's called the Primitivo because it was the first one, not because it's primitive. But it is rather remote compared to the Frances. It's you really are out there, and the towns are smaller, and there's not necessarily, you don't see nearly as many pilgrims. Eventually you come into the French way, but the first 200-300 miles, you're going over these mountains in very, very rural areas and settings. So there's one place you go over this mountain. It's called Puerto del Paso. I think it's about 3,700 to 4,000 feet. And you go way up, and we were there. It was pouring rain, 40-50 mile an hour winds, and the wind was coming through us. All the pictures we have are like rain jackets are going one way. We're kind of going into the wind, and we were coming up towards the top, and we met this other we met a Spanish man and a woman, and this one outcropping we were kind of holding on, taking our pictures, and they took our picture, we took their picture, and we he was from the same town my wife was from, Jerez de la Frontera. So I asked, hey, you wouldn't happen to know, or no, we don't, it's one of those things, but just in case I asked. And so we visited a little bit more, and then we headed up towards the top. And as we're getting right up to the top, they have a place to get out of the weather. It's called un refugio, a refuge. And it's a little cement dome that you can, if it's snowing or raining or windy too much, you can go in there to get out of the elements. And so we went in there we're walking up towards to go into it to take a little break. And Jose said, would you like some coffee? And I said, Jose, I said, you have coffee in your backpack? You carried coffee all the way up the hill? And he said, in Spanish, he said, basically, no, silly. He said, there's a road that goes right by the top, and my wife's bringing it up. She's bringing it up in a car. His wife was following them, following them along the way. And so his wife met us there, and she was this little ball of energy. She was this really, really short lady that was about as tall as she was round, and she had this coffee, and she had some liqueur she put in it. So Jose, this other woman, a friend of theirs, and his wife and my daughter and I were sitting in there drinking coffee with liqueur in it, and she went to the she went to the same high school as my wife, but different years. And so we were, we're talking about, and where we got married was just a few blocks from where they lived, and
wow.
a real kind of small world. And we were talking about, this is my daughter, and this, we're doing this, and we were visiting, and she said, have you ever heard of Manitas de Mocho? And have you heard of Manitas de Mocho?
No.
So, and I said, no, I've never heard of Manitas de Mocho or Mocho or anything about it. And she said, well, there's a pilgrim who many years ago started hiking the Camino, and he just loved it. He loved the children that he met in the little villages, and he was a Spanish guy.
Yeah.
And I've seen pictures of him now. He was a big guy with the big beard. He looked like an old-time pilgrim. And Mocho's still alive, but as far as I know. But he was this pilgrim that went around, and he just loved everything about the humanity and the giving and the caring of pilgrims. And he worked in a toy factory. And I think I'm not sure. I think Valencia area or somewhere over there. And he would give kids and people that showed exemplary pilgrim humanity, he would give a little hand. I have one over here. I'll grab it. It's a little yellow hand.
Yeah, I've seen that on Facebook, but I didn't know who that was attributed to.
So he would give it, and if you got one, like everyone would, like after he did this for many years, and it was like, oh my gosh, you got one from Mocho. Mocho gave you one of these. Manitas means little hand.
Okay.
So Manitas de Mocho. And so Mocho, and then pretty soon, like people would say that knew him say, I would like to buy these from you to give out to people as well. And he said, no, but if you give me money, I'll donate it to children's charities and to charities and different things. And so now he sells these, not sells them, but gives them in exchange for donations and different things. And so people hand these out to people. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's a wonderful story.
Yeah.
And she said, yes, so you can't buy these. You can only you have to be gifted these by somebody who thinks that you're a good example of a pilgrim and on the right path. And she like put her hand out to shake, like to put her hand like this in mine, and there was one in my hand.
Oh wow!
And I was like just goosebumps all over me. And I turned to my daughter and I said, Danny, this is it. This is what I'm waiting. This is what we've been waiting for. This is one of those moments that is just like the magical thing that can happen. And so it was funny. We drank some of this liqueur and coffee, and then some other people, I think they were German or Dutch or something, came in, and they spoke English but no Spanish. And she said, "Can you translate the story I just told you into English for these people?" I said, "All right." So I told them the whole story, and they were like, "Oh, that's really interesting." And then she gave them one too, which kind of cheapened it for me a little bit because I thought it was special. No, I'm just kidding. But she was just the nicest lady. And then we left and never saw them again. And we hiked down it's like you're at the pinnacle of this big pass, and you go down the other side, and then the next day we hike some more, and we go into a cafe, and there's a elderly lady working behind the counter at the cafe. We're having our second breakfast. Yeah. And Danny says, "Dad, look, she has a Manitas de Mocho. She had a necklace with it on her necklace." And I said to her in Spanish, I said, "Oh, how beautiful, a Manitas de Mocho." And she said, "What?" And I said, "A Manitas de Mocho." She basically, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Oh, your necklace." And she said, "Oh, my necklace." She said, "A very nice pilgrim lady came through here a couple years ago. And we had a very nice visit and very nice. And she gave this to me as a gift." And she had no idea, and she was Spanish, and she had no idea what it even meant, that it was because of her nice personality and being a good person is why she received the gift. And she had no idea. It was just, she just wore it out of honor of the lady that she met. And
wow, and she's wearing it 2 years later.
Yeah, and they're not necessarily attractive. It's a plastic yellow hand.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that something?
Well, I tell you what, we'll have to, after the call, get a photo if you can find yours, and we'll share it with everyone when we post the photo.
When we're posting, I'll see if I think it's right over here in a basket on one of my side baskets.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. First off, I thought when you were telling the story, it was enough of a Camino angel story that here you're having coffee at the top of this mountain, right? And this woman brings up hot coffee. I mean, that in itself is an angel, right?
Right.
And then the magical thing happens.
Yeah. No, the coffee part was nice, but that wasn't the magic part. Yeah, and it was totally unexpected when he just said, would you like a cup of coffee? And I said, you pack that, because it was a big hike. I said, you pack coffee all the way up here. He says, no, silly.
That is great. Well,
Yeah.
what made you in the first place pick Primitivo? Because it's not as well known of one. And I do think just the name itself kind of can scare people off a little bit. So what made you select that one that time through?
Two reasons is I with work and my obligations with everything, I have family and home life, I can't really take a month or 35, 40 days off of work. Right. So the Primitivo you can do in 14, 15, 16 days.
Okay.
So and that's why we did it. And the other part of it is, I haven't done the whole Frances. I did part of it, and then I've done from Santiago to Finisterre. And so the first part I still is on my bucket list to get done as quickly as possible. But with that said, is I love seeing pilgrims and I love having them, but I hate when you get to a town and it's just so crowded that it's like Disneyland almost. Mm-hmm. And so I thought this might be a way to get back to maybe more of meaningful time with other pilgrims, as opposed to waiting in line to get a coffee everywhere you go. So I thought that would be a little bit of a different route. I was set to go this last October on the Portuguese from Porto, but obviously that didn't happen. And I think we'll see what happens. I know right now they're starting to open up a little bit, and I'm gonna wait. I think just so I don't want to go for going sake. I want to go enjoy it, and so. I want to do the Norte after the Portuguese.
Norte looks beautiful.
Right?
Right.
It does.
So many follow-up questions. Let's see. Hopefully I'm going to remember all of them, because this is just, wow, I love the stuff that you're sharing. So let's go back to, so you've walked 2 times or more times?
I've walked 2 times. I've been to Santiago probably 6 times or so, but I've walked 2 times.
Okay.
Yep.
So let's go back to, make a little note here. I want to make sure I ask you one other thing. I want to go back to, I think as pilgrims, we talk a lot about this seed planted, right? Something happens, all of a sudden there's this awareness, for you, is that first book, Paulo Coelho's book. And then you go back to Santiago and you're in the pilgrim square. You see all the pilgrims coming in. I just wonder, do you share that thought that there is a seed planted, and that once that seed's planted, you're going to go at some point? Because it was almost 25 years from
not quite that long. Oh, you know what? It was almost 25 years. Holy smokes. Yes, it was that many years. Yeah. I'd never really done the math. Yeah, from the first seed planting to when it actually happened, it was 25 years. But I don't know, they say the line that goes through it, and all of the energy and all of that stuff. I don't know if it was necessarily that kept me to it. It was more, I love history. Mm-hmm. And I love that kind of era of the magic part of it together. And so to me, it was a place that I wanted to learn more about the story. And then all of the other stuff kind of came later. Because it's an amazing, wonderful story. Whether you're religious or not, the whole, how St. James got there, how he was found later on, the stories of him miraculously coming when they were fighting the Moors later on and saving the day, and then everything that's come since then, and then how it almost died and then came back. The fact that all of the people that have walked it for however many years. St. Francis walked it. I mean, the people that have been there and done it back in the day, that's pretty powerful. And I think a lot when I'm walking, I think about, you're walking in the footsteps of people that, back in the day, they would walk there, then they had to walk back.
Right? Can you imagine?
And
there were no cafes.
Yeah, they didn't have Gore-Tex, and they didn't have ATM machines, and they didn't have, all of that stuff that really, as hard as it can be with blisters and the things that you endure in the days and everything, we have it pretty easy. In the grand scheme of things. but taking into account the suffering and the perseverance that people have done for so many years to do this, and to be able to walk in their footsteps, to me that's the, I don't know, that's back to your seed question, is I think that my seed has grown into that respect, but it was first planted by the mystery part of it. And then, I really didn't learn about the whole the stone ship or stone boat and that whole thing until later.
Yeah.
And when I was planning for my first one, I drive my wife crazy. As Dan Mullins puts it, I'm sort of a spreadsheet pilgrim, and I do a lot of research on where I'm going to go and the history and all that stuff about it. I don't
Yes.
want to. I always feel like I'm going to walk by something and not notice.
Great.
So I want to think about it. Sometimes that's good.
So,
sometimes.
yeah, well, you mentioned something that kind of plays into my next question. So that first time, almost 25 years before you walked into the square as an official pilgrim, how would you compare and contrast? When you saw those first pilgrims 25 years ago, I don't know, was there Gore-Tex? Do the pilgrims look different? Like when you look back and you think about when you're standing with your friend whose family's from Galicia, right? And you're seeing these, you said they just look like backpackers, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you put this image in my mind that they looked different than maybe a lot of pilgrims today with, I don't know. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, man, you have to look at it from the context too, is I didn't know what they had just accomplished. And I didn't realize, and when people come in there, they've been walking a long time, and they're typically, maybe perhaps thinner than before, maybe a little more ragged than when they started. The men have bigger beards than when they started, maybe. And the women probably don't have makeup and aren't done up at all. Because that's not what it's about. So I think, it is a little bit of a haggard group when you see them there. And so it wasn't the typical, back in the 80s and early 90s and maybe even the 70s, it was a big thing, like after high school or after college, to go backpacking in Europe, which is basically you went from hostel to hostel, but you weren't really backpacking anywhere. You were getting on a train and going to the next town. The backpack just kept all your stuff in it until you got to your next. And so that was having lived in Europe for several years, another, southern Spain, that was the norm, was to see college, high school age kids backpacking, which they weren't really backpacking. They were going from, moving their stuff around. But so that was a different perspective and a different look from that point of view, I suspect. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. So how did it feel differently for you when, you're coming through the tunnel? I'm imagining you're hearing the bagpiper that plays there, one of them. And that first moment when you stepped into the square, you've seen the cathedral before many times, but now you're standing before it as an official pilgrim.
It was a giant, I get it. That aha moment where I get it now. Now, like, as when you come in and you're sitting, everyone's, laying around, sitting around the edges and just soaking it all in. You can't describe that to somebody unless you have done it and you know it. And that sense of accomplishment that you can see on everybody's face is magical in of itself. And then also that happy, sad duality of it's over. Now, obviously, they say that it's really the end is the beginning, and we hear all those things about. Then you take that back, which the fact that you and I are sitting here talking about it proves that point a little bit. But it's happy and sad. It's really. Not only have you met, I mean, have you done one or two?
I've just done one.
Okay, but how many like lifelong friends did you meet for a day? Like,
Can't even tell you.
You met people that I have lots of friends on Facebook, and that we text back and forth and do things that I met them 2-3 days tops. We visited, and now we have that connection, that we share that feeling that when you do come in, that duality of happy and sad, and also accomplishment, and almost like a cleansing of your soul, so to speak, right?
Yeah,
you get almost like you've burned all your clothes in a cauldron. Like you've kind of opened up, and you have a different perspective, and I think you can go back being able to appreciate what you have and be able to go back and be a better person. But also I think it gives you a different perspective to see the good in other people. I know, like we all know, I'm as guilty as this as anybody. You look at somebody or you see somebody and you naturally have instinctive sense of your reality of what they are.
Yes.
And you can't help it. We all have that programmed into us that you see somebody. And I will say that everybody has a story, and everybody has a unique story that you can learn from that can help you. And but you have to listen, and you have to be open enough to care. And the pilgrimage, the Camino, there's no better platform from which to have that connection. Like you can try, but like you said before, is if you try to do that at Starbucks, they'll think you're a weirdo. Right?
Right.
Right.
I think that connection continues, far after. And, the next thing I wanted to bring up, I think really illustrates how you and I met, right? And, I just wanted to, if it's okay with you, I wanted to share a little bit about a message that you sent to me. Because one of the things that's really touched me over this last year is that, I too had pilgrimages planned for 2020. And like everybody else, that's many people probably watching or listening to us today, they also had trips that have been delayed. And, but I feel like my Camino family has grown this year, this past, 15, 16 months now, yet I haven't stepped a foot in Spain. I haven't taken one step on the Camino during this time, but my Camino family continues to grow. And that connection is so strong in this community. And, I think that's one of the things that draws us back, of course. But I wanted to say that I think the way that you and I met, and I think this really illustrates the Camino spirit, is that you reached out to me and connected with me after you heard an interview that Dan Mullins was so kind. He interviewed me for his program, for his podcast, and he interviewed you back in 2017, I think, which I encourage everyone, if you haven't listened to it or you've forgotten about that interview, I would really encourage you to go back and listen to Dan's interview with Steve, because it's very good. And of course, Steve and I are both big fans of Dan, and we can't get enough of his show. So I assume everybody watching this probably feels the same way. But
DOD, we are disciples of Dan.
Yes, I love that. We are definitely disciples of Dan. We quote him, all of that. But you reached out to me, and you said something in your message that really touched me. And you said, the Camino provides the perfect vehicle for our own individual sense of finding our unique path to mindfulness. After a Camino, walking becomes a ritual, thus providing the groundwork for becoming mindful and aware each and every day, wanting to be good, do good, and help others be better people. Because of the Camino, my daily ritual includes walking. And this really, first off, the fact that you reached out, right? And that showed me that Camino spirit and that expansion of Camino family, because you could have just listened to it and let it go, right? But you took the time to message me, which really, touched me. And it's always nice when someone hears your story and they connect with it or they validate it. So I wanted to thank you, first of all, for that. Also, in reading that, I felt like you just really embodied the Camino spirit about knowing about the mindfulness. So I just want to first kind of talk about that. Is how did mindfulness play a role for you in your Caminos as you walked? And how does it play a role in your life today?
Oh, great. Thank you for, when you mentioned that before, I'd forgotten that note I'd sent. I just thought we'd always been friends.
Yeah.
So, it's funny, the mindfulness aspect of it is I never really had given much thought to it as far as, trying to do good and living a good life and doing, going through the steps as we all do. But being there, it really made you maybe pay closer attention to when someone might need your help, or looking for what somebody is really needing. And sometimes they just need someone to be walking by them, or sometimes they need somebody to be to lend an ear, or sometimes they are there to be your sounding board. But the mindfulness of what we do in everyday life, I will say this is I came back from my first Camino more aware of what was going on around me. Not the sense of like looking for danger, that type of aware, but just seeing emotion better. And again, doing away with the preconceived notion of what you just assume. And I think it's okay to share your emotion when I Dan interviewed a priest once, and the priest said something that I think about all the time. It was so good. It was he said, sometimes people that need love the most ask for it in the most unloving ways.
Oh,
Isn't that
yes.
amazing? And when so somebody's like really like being not very mindful, it's sometimes it's very helpful for them if you take a step back and take it as, don't disengage, but engage, or don't strike back with words or with hurtful whatever, say it's okay, or engage them in some sense. So the mindfulness for me has been able to connect. I think I connect better, and I'm able to hear better. And I'm pretty happy-go-lucky guy all the time anyway, but it probably, it's okay to be happy. And and I think if you're happy rather than worrying about everything all the time, I think that's contagious. And especially as we're coming out of COVID, where there's a lot of anxiety,
Yes.
and there's a lot of deep-rooted isolation. Sometimes people just need a smile, and that smile and that smile can be a hug if now that we can't touch anyone anymore. But I mean, and now they can't see it with the mask on, you can't see people's smiles as much, but still that smile and that sharing that compassion when you really don't know everything that's going on, but sometimes that can change the course of someone's life. And I think with the Camino, it's maybe a way to hone our skill, to sharpen your axe, so to speak, with your own mindfulness of your own self and your own projection and what you do on a day-to-day basis. What better way than to hone that skill than to be in a place where it's receptive and you can practice it to take it home? Because really it's a giant, it's however many, it's a 500-mile practice to going back for life. And it is a way to test out what you're doing, to go home and have to be armed and dangerous, so to speak, with regards to mindfulness and being a better person. I have one quick. I shared the story on the last one, but I'm going to share it again because it all has to do with that mindfulness and how it ends. I got to Finisterre, and it was pouring rain. And if those of you that haven't been there, the town is about a mile or a mile and a half from the point, which is actually the end of the Camino, the kilometer 0 after Santiago, when you go out to the very point.
Yeah, I haven't been there. I really want to go.
Yeah, Finisterre in Latin means the end of the earth. And they used to think, before Columbus went on his little boat ride over here, they used to think that was the end of the earth, and after that you go off. And so it's this point that sticks way out, kind of off the coast above Portugal and Galicia, way out there. And so when you get there, I hiked up there, and I was by myself, and it was pouring rain, and there was a German, and I think there was a German or Dutch couple, two couples, and myself and this other Dutch guy. And the German couple said, "Would you take our picture?" I said, "Yeah, if you take my picture afterwards." And then the Dutch guy said, "Would you take my picture after that, off the point?" Right. And we all said yes. And I took the pictures of the Germans, and they took my picture. And then now it's just myself and this one guy, this tall, thin. I mentioned the haggard look of the pilgrim that had been a long way. He fit the bill. Okay. And he said there's like a telephone or an antenna tower that's out on the point. It's this metal erector set looking tower that stands up there. And there's a bunch of shoes and backpacks and mementos tied to it and set up all around it. And I introduced myself. I'm Steve, and his name was Peter. And Peter said, hey, when you take my picture, I'm going to climb up on that tower. I'm going to tie a pair of shoes. I'm going to tie this backpack up there. I said, all right. He said, well, what's going on? And he said, well, I just finished. And I said, well, we all kind of just finished. This is the end. I was like, it's like, no, duh, we all finished. And this was in October. This was towards the end of October. And he said, no, I started in June. I said, what? And he said, I started in June in Amsterdam. And he says, I just got here. And I go,
how many miles is that?
This is June to, it's, how many miles was it? I want to say, I wrote it down. Let me see. I can't remember. It's a long ways. It's a long ways. And it's 1,950 miles, I think. And I was like, oh my gosh. I said, give me a hug. And so just pre-COVID, we could hug and touch back then.
Yeah.
And so we gave each other a big hug, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And so he climbed up there. I took his picture, and I said, June till October, that is amazing. I said, tell me what you learned. And he said, he kind of turned around and he looked at me and he says, Steve, he said, I left Amsterdam with a lot of questions. He says, I'm now a better man, and I'm going to go home and make everybody around me better people. And I go, give me another hug. And it was like, we're both like, dang, you're crying, standing on this rock, these two grown men out there, on the rock with that. But I will say this, that mindfulness right there, that, he did that. And his first thought was, I'm going to go home and make people around me better people. And I just, that right there, that's what it's all about right there. How can we do better? How can we be better people?
Yes. Great. How remarkable that he's walked that far. And those are the first words that he says, that he just wants really to be a better person and, help other people to be better. I mean, no better way to pay it forward than to just be better yourself.
Yeah. And he was, he was just, what an amazing man he was. And I would guess, having from June until October, he probably was a much better man. I mean, talk about a 1,900-mile confession box. He probably, that guy probably could punch his ticket to heaven tomorrow, right?
No kidding.
Right. Yep.
Wow. Okay. So if somebody's watching this and, the seed's been planted for them, we think, or they think, and, what would you say to them? Why should they go? Why would you tell someone to walk? If you had to narrow it down to maybe 3 reasons, what are the 3 reasons that you would encourage them to walk?
Well, first off, and this is maybe something that you don't think about, and you don't realize that you're in a rut. And I think when I went, I had some things I was dealing with, trying to figure out what to do, but it is a way to the awakening of your mindfulness that otherwise that you maybe didn't even know that was in you. And I think we all become better people. I mean, the fact that you're walking every day 15 to 25 miles, that's not something very many people do in their lifetime. And here we do it every day. And the things that you see add to that. I mean, whether it be something special, whether it be a beautiful sunrise, a beautiful sunset, whether it be a family with a kid in a backpack doing the hike, on their back, the stuff that you just think like, my gosh, they're in this, and they're doing it, and they're succeeding, and they're getting better and stronger every day, and that getting better. And I also think, like, when you're getting ready to go, and maybe if you're doing it right, you should be practicing walking beforehand and getting your steps in and wearing your shoes and all that stuff. But assuming you did all that, you still, that first day, even though you're in good shape when you first start, your knees are a little wobbly because you're just setting out. You don't know what's going to be like. But I think mentally we're that way too. And as we go through the Camino, not only do our legs get stronger, our backs get stronger, we get a little tan, we get a nice tan, and we look at our best when we arrive, other than once we take a good shower.
Yeah, right.
But I think most importantly is our inner self is growing along the way too. So we're building strength physically, we're building strength mentally. And if anyone asks me about that, is I think you don't know what you don't know about yourself. And if you ever want to really dive in to know all that you can about yourself and to learn how you can be better and be better to those around you, and basically I think be happy. Because I don't think very many, you don't talk to very many pilgrims that come back and they're not happier.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know if it's because they're a part of something, because it is something special and something that is binding. Like you and I can have these conversations. We both understand, what, your magical takeaway has led you to host this wonderful show. And my, I listen to podcasts when I walk. So I walk every day now, and it's kind of my close out the day kind of thing. And it's, to me, it's, I want to continue to feel that feeling.
Yes.
And I will say back to your original question. I know I just rambled on long
Okay.
beyond the question is if you're looking for a way to be a better person and to learn more about yourself and strengthen not only your physical body but your mental being, there is no better way of doing that. And I also think it's okay to do by yourself. I'm never fearful of being a man walking by myself. I'm not afraid of it. But I'll tell you this: if you're a woman and considering this, I think I don't know what the statistics say, but I would say the average, by far, there are more women walking it than men. And I would also say that probably, and it might depend on the time of the year that you go, but there's probably more middle-aged to 60s women doing it as well. Then there are, and not just, I met several women that were in their 70s and even a couple in their 80s. You can do it. And I think if you think you can't do it, then think again, and you have to work towards it. You can't just say, I'm going to do it tomorrow. But I think everybody can do it if they put their mind to it. And I also think no matter where you are and with your life, you'll come away a better person for it.
Yeah, couldn't say it better. Couldn't say it better. When you look back at your first Camino and then the second one, were there differences in how you packed, or what you thought was so necessary in that first trip? Now you're getting ready to go on the Primitivo with your 18-year-old, 17-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
Were there things like, oh, honey, you don't need that? Or were there things that you took the first time that you're like, we don't need to put that in the backpack?
Certainly, I did not use poles the first time.
Mm-hmm.
I did the second time. But, it's interesting. My daughter didn't think she needed them. And then we ended up bringing, because we brought one set and we swapped all the time. So okay. She would use them for an hour, I'd use them for an hour. And sometimes when you're up in the mountains, it really helped. And you know what? So again, the perception and seeing stuff. Whenever I used to see people walking with poles, I think, what a couple of idiots. They look stupid walking with their poles out there. But holy smokes, I've joined the ranks of those guys because they really do help, and they really do make a difference. And so poles are a big one. Now I backpack a lot. And I have carried heavy packs over mountains and spent, I backpacked in Alaska for 2.5 weeks. So I've done it. So I feel like I don't have to prove that I can carry a big pack. So I don't consider it cheating, but I do most of the time carry a light pack and have my stuff stand ahead.
Yeah.
From the standpoint of why burden yourself with that extra weight if you don't need to? Right. I carry water, a rain jacket. I sometimes even carry an extra pair of shoes. I have a nice pair of hiking shoes, but I also have a light pair of tennis shoes. And if I know I'm going to be walking on the road all day, why wear hiking shoes when the tennis shoes work just fine?
Yeah.
then I have a small, like a roller bag kind of bag that it's a roller bag, backpack kind of roller bag thing that goes to the next one. Then I have, more clothes. I mean, I still pack very, very, very light.
Right.
But so again, I think, and that's another aspect of the Camino, is there is no right way or wrong way of doing it. It's your way. And what makes
just going to say that.
Yep. And what makes you, what's best for you is best for you. And don't let anyone else tell you. And, there's purists out there to say, oh, you have to walk the French way, and you have to walk this many miles a day, and you have to carry this, and you have to do this. And, no, you don't. You can do it your way. And your way is your way. And I met a wonderful guy. Oh, this really kind of met this guy from New York the first time, my first Camino, and he'd started close to the French border, and he developed some blisters and some back issues. And I found out later that his daughter had committed suicide right before he went, why he was doing it. And just the nicest guy. And but you could just tell sometimes he was with us and sometimes he was by himself. And but he would walk until his feet and his back hurt, and then he would stay in a nice hotel and then take a bus or a train or a taxi a couple towns up and then rest. And then everybody would kind of come in and he'd kind of reconnect with everybody. And then he'd walk a day or so or 2 days, and then he would go. For him, that was what he needed. And because he had a hard time with some foot issues. And I think back on it is, that he got as much out of it as he could have. I mean, and it worked. It was awesome. And we'd see him and, hey, how's your foot? Oh, it's doing better. And, he'd walk until, that something else was going wrong, and he'd take a break, and we'd meet him in a day or two. Yeah. And so, I mean, it's, you're doing it.
Where do you think that comes from? Because it's something I think a lot about, and I really appreciate you coming right out and saying, I didn't, I had somebody help with the baggage, right? And I did the same thing. And I think when you, there seems to be some lingering judgment as to what constitutes a real pilgrimage, right? And if you didn't do the full Frances, carrying the full weight and then you're not a real pilgrim.
Yeah. Well, I like to throw,
coming from?
I think it's kind of like we all want, there's some people who carry that righteousness about everything that they do, that you have to do it this way. But I had somebody tell me that one time, and I said, so the right way to be a pilgrim, you have to do it. I said, well, then you're walking back home, right? You're walking back. If you're doing it the right way, the way it was intended to, you don't fly home from Santiago. You walk back to where you started, right? Oh, yeah. And the other thing too, if you really want to be a purist, then maybe you should be wearing sandals made out of sheepskin, and some burlap sacks around you when you're walking too, because really that is probably more traditional way. And then sleeping, not even in albergue, traditional will probably be sleeping out under the ground somewhere. So I mean, you can take that as far as you want. I mean, it's the same thing with skiing or with jogging or with anything you do. There's people that say it has to be done a certain way, and I think that's just human nature a little bit. But again, the true sense of being a pilgrim and being accepting of everybody is there shouldn't be any judgment, because you're doing it. You're doing something. You're not thinking about doing something. There's a lot of people out there that are always thinking about doing something, and then there are those that do it. Right. And so I don't have a problem with that. I think, and again, I probably maybe I have that feeling because I'm not doing it the traditional way, so that's the way I feel about it. But I have it with work and family. I can't do 35 days a pop. The second I have a free time, my bucket list, the one that I really, really want to do, I want to do the Plata from the south. And that one I think takes probably 45 days. And that's one I really want to do, because I can leave from where my in-laws and all live. I could just walk right out the door. So we all have our own way of doing it, and make of it as you will.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you're bringing some of these things up because I think, not everybody can afford or take the time off or have maybe the emotional or physical strength at a certain period of time. And I think as pilgrims, we've really got to examine the judgment that maybe we're forming about someone. I mean, how many times, like, your one story earlier, I think when we were talking, not knowing that you had met someone that couldn't see,
Mhm.
right? And you can so easily judge someone. And I always think when I find myself today starting to be judgmental, because I mean, we've certainly all have gone through a lot these past several months, right? And there's been a lot of debate about how we each handle what's been going on, wearing masks, not wearing masks, getting a vaccine, not getting a vaccine, and so on. That when we start seeing that judgment creeping in, it's kind of like, need to walk need to walk a few more miles, right? Maybe to get back to that place where we realize we don't know everybody's stories, right? And when we meet, a pilgrim's probably going to share with you, they might share with you eventually, but when we first meet them, those first few seconds, or probably maybe where the judgment forms more is when we just pass somebody, right? Or we see them at a cafe or whatever, and we form this opinion. And then later, a couple of days later, we spend a little more time with them and we find out that their story is not at all what we had concocted in our
Yeah,
minds, right? and
yeah. I I have a really funny story, and maybe this is one that we can kind of tie it together with,
yeah,
is from the judgment perspective, and then also a funny antidote to bring it all home here is my daughter and I were walking, and it was, I don't even remember where, but I just remember being a long gradual uphill. And we were walking up and up and up, and her and I were just, we were walking at a good pace, but we weren't running, and these two Spanish women were walking behind us, and they were in their 30s, and they were laughing, having a great time, and I was listening to them talk. And in Spain, a slang for a foreigner is called a giddy.
again,
So giddy. So if you're like a foreigner, they'll refer to you like a giddy as. It's not really bad, but it is kind of like they're almost making fun of you. Oh, look at that giddy kind of thing. And
okay,
so my daughter and I are walking up, and obviously we're not Spanish, and so these two women and they were just talking and having a good time between themselves, and and the one says to the other one, man, I really need a cup of coffee. I need that my second coffee, and man, I really want that coffee. I wish I knew where we could get a coffee. And the one said to the other one, well, as soon as we get by these giddies, maybe there'll be a coffee place up here a little bit further. And I said, I turned to her and I said, in Spanish, I said, I think there's a coffee place about another kilometer up around the corner. And they both like just went like, because they didn't realize I'd been listening to everything they've been saying the whole time. And she said, where are you from? And I said, well, we're from the United States and Estados Unidos. And she said, how do you speak Spanish? And I said, well, my wife's from Spain. And they were from the next town over from my wife's they were from Cadiz, and she's from Cadet, which is right there. So then we started talking and having a great time, and we went and had coffee together. And then for the next 7, 8 days, we were great. They were part of our pack. And so we stopped for breakfast. We stopped for coffee that right after we met, and they said, where are you staying when you get to Santiago? And I said, well, I'm not sure yet, but probably I normally stay at this place, close to the cathedral. There's a hotel I usually stay in. And she said, well, it was Bea and Laura. She said, Laura and I, she said, we have a spa reserve, and
oh,
we're gonna get massages, we're gonna get pedicures, manicures, steam baths, and it's just gonna be amazing. And she just, like, every day we'd see her in the morning, and she'd say, where are you staying when you get to Santiago? I'd say, all right, enough about your spa already,
right, right.
6 or 7 days, all day long. She'd say, they'd be saying, 3 more days to the spa, and it's going to be wonderful. We're going to do this and this, and we're just going to lounge around for a day, and it's going to be wonderful. So as we come into Santiago, we meet, we all come into the square together. Still, the pictures I have from there, I can still feel the emotion when you go back and look at the pictures and how wonderful it is. And it was early afternoon, and we agreed them to go to their it was called San Francisco Spa and Resort Retreat or something.
Okay,
And we were going to go to our little, Alfonso II little hole in the wall hotel, 1-star hotel. And and we agreed that we'd meet for dinner at 9 o'clock. It's some place that you do there. 9 o'clock was typical time to meet for dinner. And so we were all texting each other the place we were going to meet and everything. And so we all went our separate ways. And they got in a cab to go to their San Francisco spa and retreat place. And we walked to where we were going. And then about 8:30, we get a text that says, we're going to be late. We'll be there. We'll meet. Go where you're going to go and tell us we're going to be late. So we said, all right. So the rest of the group, we all went and we're eating. And then here they show up. And they said, you're not going to believe what happened. The taxi driver took us to this place and it was a dump. It was terrible. And it was awful. And there was no spa or no anything. We went in and we said, this is the San Francisco spa. And this is the San Francisco, but it's not a spa. And the guy at the hotel says, I don't think there is a spa in town here, anything like that. And she said, we paid for this 2 months ago. We have all of our reservations. And so he handed the guy the reservations, and the guy's looking at it. He goes, San Francisco Spa Retreat. He goes down. He says, Senora or Senorita. He said, these reservations are for Santiago, Chile. She had made reservations on the internet in Chile for Chile, not even in Spain. And so there was a beer festival going on and a music festival going on, and there was no hotels that were open. And the hostels, because it was already now, it was like late, and the hostels were filled up, or the albergues were filled up, and the reason they were late is they were trying to find a place to stay, and they finally found a place that was several $100s that was very expensive. It was the last place in town that they had to share a room, and it was, but anyway, from all those giddies that don't know what they're doing, when they get out of our way, we'll get by them and have a coffee too. They're the ones that had the mistake at the end, that had everything screwed up with where to stay and everything. But it was like, oh my gosh, we're still friends on Facebook and stuff. And every time I see a spa or something, I'll take a picture of it.
I think that's a beautiful story in so many ways. I mean, it really illustrates, right? Your Camino doesn't end when you get to Santiago, right?
Yeah.
Here they think it's done and they're going to go have this whole spa experience. And the Camino said, not so fast.
Yeah. Every day they'd rub it in too. They'd say, every day we had breakfast, they'd say, so where are you going to stay when we get to Santiago? We're staying in a spa, and we're going to have our nails done. We're going to have a pedicure. It's going to,
Well, I can't think of a better story to end our discussion. I know oh my goodness, I've kept you so long, but your stories are so captivating. And, I know that everyone that is watching and listening, I think that you can see the Camino spirit so well and alive in Steve. And I'm sure after hearing his stories, you'll be inspired to walk again or to take that first step. And we hope that you do. And Steve, I just want to thank you for being here tonight with us. And for those of you that have listened and heard this interview, please leave us a little thumbs up, a comment, or a review so that other people will listen, because I think the stories that Steve shared today are really worth hearing. And we want to make sure that his stories get heard. So help us pass the word along. So thank you, Steve, for coming. I so enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure, and keep up the good work with Camino Cafe. I think it's terrific what you're doing. And I think I shared with you in the very beginning that it should be Camino Cafe and Vino. I'm just saying.
I totally agree. We may have to add that to our title.
Right.
Well, thank you for helping make it what it is, because it wouldn't be anything without the pilgrims that we meet. And I so appreciate our connection, and thank you. And I can't wait to see photos when you take your next one. And we got to get a photo of your marker that you're making. We'll add that to our post. But I can't wait to see photos from your next Camino. Hopefully we'll meet there maybe someday walking together. So thank you so much. And thank you everyone for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Buen Camino.
Buen Camino.